Welcome to LCS Talks. I'm Berkeley Glazer, and I'm the principal of Langley Christian Middle School.
And I'm Kevin Merchandani, Director of Instruction.
Kevin, this is a great day. We've got a great panel. Tell us what's going on today.
Yeah, Berkeley, we are continuing on in our discussions about our LCS core programs. Our core programs are athletics, STEM, service, and the arts. There's a couple A's in there for our programs, and this is the S for STEM. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Sometimes we throw in the ACE and make it STEAM, but we have decided to call it STEM. Our STEM programming is all about helping our students to see the world scientifically, mathematically, and seeing that integration of faith bring those two concepts together. There's some amazing skills that we can teach in the STEM context, and that's why we've chosen to focus in on that. And our programs are moving really from a broader set of skills that come up in the STEM programming to a specific set of skills that are specialized. And so we'll use that word specialized throughout our conversations. But we think that great programs develop students to thrive with purpose. And the reason why we focused in on STEM as one of our K-12 core programs is because we don't want our students just to have a general experience and preparation for life, but we want students to pursue different areas and carve out new ways to think about the world and see their faith lived out in the different issues and challenges that life presents. And one of those ways that we do that is by providing opportunities for students to use their mathematical competence and science skills to develop new solutions and problems and find ways to help change the world. That's a big part of being future focused. So yeah, really excited today to talk about how our students can thrive in the STEM classes, and going to be a great conversation here today on LCS Talks. So
yeah. Awesome. Good stuff. Yeah, let me introduce the panel. We have Tim Van Hemert, who is our K-5 coordinator for STEM. Tim, why don't you say hi?
Hello.
Just so people can get to know who you are on the podcast. We have Raynor here, who is a teacher in the grade 6, 7, 8 middle school program. Lee, you want to say hi so they can hear you?
Hello, everybody.
And we've got John Van Weelden, who is our ADST guru in high school, grades 9 to 12.
Hi, Berkeley. Great to be here.
Awesome. Good to have you here, John. All right, first question, gentlemen, is our viewers, our listeners really want to get to know you a little bit, and we love to have you start by just sharing your God stories, how God brought you here. And again, it's the Coles Notes version, but go for it. Why don't we go just in order? We'll go Tim, Lee, and then John.
All right. So Tim here. I was born here in Langley, youngest of 5. My dad was a pastor here in the community. And so being a pastor's kid, of course, grew up in the church. Our family was very Christ-centered. I actually went to school at Langley Christian in kindergarten in grade 1, when it was still called Shannon Heights Christian School. And after grade 1, we moved to Florida, and I had a tough time going to school. I had a really hard time in school. I was very creative, artistic. I wasn't really a model student at all. I think that's part of why I became a teacher. So having that rough time, and then for university, I went to Redeemer University in Ontario, and I think that's where my faith was really shaped, because I think before then I was still had a lot of questions and wasn't really following God like I should have. But I think Redeemer University was a really good place for me and really shaped me, and that's why I'm also a huge proponent for even post-secondary Christian education. And yeah, that's where I met my wife, Janet, who also works here. And I've been here for 25 years.
Wow,
That's awesome. Yeah, we love the Van Hemerts and the history that you bring, and also just how you have continued to build a community of faith here in the work that you and Janet are doing. And it's cool to hear that your kids are even at Redeemer, and yeah, really excited to hear more about you. We've had you on the podcast before, Tim, and it's always great to hear your voice again and to build on some of those conversations that we've started.
Very cool. And Lee, I know you've got a great story. Brings you from the other side of the world. Share a little with us.
Yeah, thanks, Berkeley. So I was born and raised in South Africa, and when I was about 13, I gave my life to the Lord. So I grew up going to church and knowing a lot about God, but not really having a personal relationship with Him until the early parts of my high school. And then when I finished school, I felt the Lord calling me to be a teacher, and so it hadn't really been something that had been on my radar up until that point. So I took a gap year and then went and studied education and taught in South Africa for a number of years. And then probably the journey started about 3.5 years, maybe 4 years ago now already. My wife and I felt the Lord stirring us. And at that point, we weren't really sure where He was going to lead us to. We just knew that He had a journey for us that was going to be exciting and was probably going to involve us taking some risk and putting our faith out there. And so through a series of prayer and trying to hear the Lord and chatting to friends in church about what we felt the Lord was doing, we basically ended up with, we felt the Lord was calling us to Canada, and specifically to southwestern Canada. And so once we'd reached that point, I reached out to LCS, sent my resume in, and had a call with Adam, and got the ball rolling. One thing led to another. And yeah, my wife and I and our 3 kids have been living in Canada now for a little over 2 years and absolutely loving it. Like, the Lord has been unbelievably good and faithful to us, and we're so thankful for bringing us all here.
Awesome. All right, and John, tell us a little bit about your God story.
Yeah, of course. I grew up not as far as Lee, but I grew up in around Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the Midwest of the states. And I grew up in a Christian household, 2 strong believing parents. I went to a church, Brookfield Christian Reformed Church, and across the parking lot of my church was Brookfield Christian School. So a very strong church school community. Grew up in Christian education, and a very tight-knit community. I think the school's grown since, but my graduating class in grade 8 was 11 students, I believe. So just really tight-knit community, a lot of overlap between church and school. And that was really impactful on my faith formation and growing up to know Christ. And fast forwarding a little bit, I was always interested through high school in the mathematics and in physics and the types of sciences I could work with my hands and kind of do experiments with my hands and take things apart. And so I was interested in engineering, and when I was looking at universities, my older brother was a civil engineer, and my dad is an electrical engineer, and so I thought, how about I try mechanical engineering? We joke we could have started some kind of family firm or something, but I decided to go to Dordt College, now Dordt University. And I was looking at engineering, but I was also looking at education as well for a little bit there. And my mom advised me, how about you pursue engineering? And if it's engineering is broad enough that if you wanted to switch to education, you could always switch to think about teaching later. And she must have been prophetic at that time, because I finished my mechanical engineering degree and then worked for 4 years in a manufacturing company. And then I was working with young people at church, and my wife's a teacher, and I just kept hearing God's call towards teaching again and thinking about what that would look like. So I saw a posting at Langley Christian High School for robotics and computer science, and I knew if I was to switch to teaching, it would definitely involve robotics. So I jumped on that application, and now this is my 5th year teaching here.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's really interesting to see different parts of this idea of the biblical narrative in your own lives. Like, God created you in a certain time and place and context, and there's this moment of figuring out where might you be and where might you invest in your family and what's God doing, and then moving into this kind of redeeming, restoring, like God planting you in a community and helping you to thrive. And we often talk about that in terms of the biblical narrative of creation, fall, redemption, restoration. And that happens probably several times throughout our lives, even though we know there's this core moment of Christ's redemption in our lives. And so as I think about a theology of technology, I wonder if what we see in the world today in the fall of humanity's brokenness and our need to be restored is being redeemed in and through STEM, the sciences, the ability to create and to participate with God's full agency and our partnership with the Spirit's work. And so in one way, I almost think that the fall is what allows for STEM to actually be possible. But at the same time, I see STEM as something that allows for God to redeem a broken world. So just all that to say that the biblical narrative is a big part of our framework of teaching and learning. But I would love to hear some of your thoughts. What kind of foundation do you see the Bible providing in terms of thinking about STEM and giving us a purpose of its understanding and its place in a Christian learning community?
Well, I totally agree with you about the role of the fall and this distortion of how we do things and the chaos created by sin, and our job to restore that and kind of reclaim and create alongside God. But when I teach about the role of technology in creation, I back up before the fall as well. And I talk about, with my students, God creating the world with potential, like the potential for computers and the potential for mechanics and the potential for all of those things. So there's latent potential in the background when God was creating. I got that idea from an engineering professor, Derek Sherman, and he always talks about the creation being nature, stars, trees, mountains, rivers, and everything like that. But also creation is everything that God ordained to be in the future. So he has this interesting passage where he digs into the creation story in Genesis 2 and is talking about the gold that's in the land and the resin and the onyx, and he talks about maybe the sand underneath Adam and Eve's feet has been used to make silicone that are in our computer chips today. So just kind of reframing students' perspectives that computers and AI and robots, God isn't surprised that those things are starting to emerge out of creation. But you're fully right that we've distorted it with sin, right? And we've twisted things up quite a bit. And so much of our engineering now is backtracking things that we've created in the past that have been distortions of what God truly intended, how he intended our creation to unfold. So I don't know if any of you guys relate to that or want to expand on that.
Yeah, I think I love the word backtrack there, John. I think that's great. And I think a lot of what we do with robotics and technology is about trying to alleviate suffering and improve living conditions. And I also see that as part of our mandate of stewarding the earth that God has given to us. But at the same time, God as creator, we're his image bearers, and so we have the gift of creativity. And so I don't see robotics and technology only as a response to the fall. I also think because God is creative and he's given us creativity, we have the ability to innovate.
And even this last couple of weeks, we had Pastor Greg Harris share with us that what it means to be human is not always defined by potentiality, but sometimes by our limitations. And it's if you're anything like me, when it comes to the arts or being creative, you really realize your own limitations in the presence of trying to create and trying to find solutions and innovate as well too. So I think it really reveals what humanity is also like and experiencing, but at the same time, it also reveals God's beauty and what he does in and through humanity in those circumstances. Tim, what's your take in terms of biblical theological kind of perspective?
Well, I do like to think of it as STEAM. You said I know it's STEM, and art is kind of separate, but I think the two should be integrated. I like the integration of art and STEM. Art is my background, and I think the thing about art in STEM, it helps us. Creativity is really important when it comes to problem solving, and there's beauty too. That's also another important part of STEM, I think. And yeah, it's definitely a way that we can help restore the kingdom through technology and through those things. And the examples I think of and I bring up in class when it comes to creating things, as I look at Genesis account of Jubal, Jabal, and Tubal-Cain, they were the first makers accounted for. They created things out of iron. They made tents, musical instruments. And I think this just shows us that God's creation produces creators. And this was God's intention. And then that way we can know that God created us in this way, in his image, and we can praise him with what we create.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love your guys' analogies, and it just speaks so true to us being able to redeem a part or the parts of the world that have fallen, but in a way that says, oh, we are image bearers of Christ, and that God is a creator, we are creators, and how that can go beyond just the hardware, but get into that art and that creation that you're talking about, Tim. Let's just delve into our K-12 STEM program now. And, we're trying to help our students navigate this arena. And we're trying to establish developing skills that are age appropriate. So let's talk a little bit about what skills we want to develop with them, talk about what type of attitudes we want our students to have in this area of learning, and maybe a little bit about our hopes and dreams of who they might become as adults in this area. So, Tim, why don't you start talking to us about what's happening in the elementary?
Yeah, elementary. I think one of the big ideas is learning through play, right? We just do a lot of experimental learning. The kids play. There's a lot of activities where we follow the instructions, and that's the challenge in itself, just being able to follow instructions. And then there's other times when they're free to build or code or make whatever they want. So there's a bit more openness there. So there's more structured activities, and then there's less structured activities. But with everything, with a lot of the activities we do, they're in teams or in pairs, and collaboration is a huge part of it. Learning how to work with anyone. That's usually the main learning target is work with anyone in your class. How do you be a good teammate? We talk about are you a log, a hog, or a cog, right? Which one are you being right now? We'll stop and think, okay, which one are you being right now? Because some kids like to just take over. Some kids just like to sit back. Some kids just get in the way. And some kids learn how to work with others. And we talk about that a lot, how to be a good teammate, how to live in community that way.
Yeah. Tell us some more about the programs that are being developed from K-5 there.
Yeah, so with robotics, kindergarten grade 1, we're using little Ozobots. They're these tiny, cute little robots that we can code with lines on paper. They can also code with an iPad. And in grades 2 and 3, they're using Lego Spike robotics, which is kind of neat. And then grades 4 and 5, they're using Vex Go, which continues on in the middle high school with other Vex programs. So, and in all those things, there's structured activities, there's structured building, and there's also make your own robot. There's make your own Mars lander, make your own thing. So there's creativity involved there, but they have to, the structured activities help them build the skills for the more open activities. And then that's just the robotics. And then we do building, we do art, we do other strands as well.
Right. Yeah. It's the same as Lee's going to talk about middle in a minute, but there's many avenues to apply design skills and technology. But again, we're talking about the STEAM areas. So Lee, why don't you tell us a little bit about middle school and what the kids journey through in grades 6, 7, 8?
Thanks, Berkeley. So in middle school, we also use Vex. We use the Vex IQ software for robotics. And so we're introducing the students and allowing them, it's a block coding program where they're able to physically build a number of different robots. And so like Tim said, part of that is group work and collaboration and being able to be a good teammate and work well in a group. Part of that is being able to follow instructions. And part of that is being able to express yourself and bring the art and the creative flair into their constructions and their real world. And we spend a bunch of time doing coding. We create obstacle courses for their robots that they have to code around and test and retest to get their robots to complete the obstacle courses. And we just have a bunch of fun with playing different robotic games which is a little more laid back, a little more fun perhaps for the students. The students, when they're on a robotics course, are spending about 2 blocks a week on robotics, and so it's a lot of fun. And we're also working at their critical thinking skills. So a lot of it is troubleshooting problems. Hey, I tried this and my robot doesn't do it. Okay, well, how can we fix it? Let's talk about it. Let's think. Ask your group. Ask around. And so teamwork and collaboration is a big skill we're wanting them to learn. I also really like the fact that robotics is so hands-on in the middle school. They're physically getting a box of pieces that they know is all there, and they're trying to assemble it themselves and put it together, which is really, really cool. And then I also love the fact that technology is seen as a tool for service, that we're able to encourage students to think about how technology beyond middle school, perhaps even beyond school, can be seen as having a positive impact on the world, and it can reflect our Christian love to the world.
Awesome. Very good. And we're all about scaffolding and trying to develop skills and abilities so that when they come to high school, John, you can even build on that. So tell us a little bit about your programs.
Yeah, we use the VEX system as well. And for those of you who aren't aware of VEX as much, you can do some research. But from the VEX Go up to the VEX IQ, they're more snap-on connector components, almost like, I know the IQ almost similar to Lego Mindstorm type technology. And then when you get into the VEX V5, it's more of almost like erector sets with a bunch of motion components. And so you're building these robots out of steel channel and aluminum channel and different motors and systems so that you are creating robots. And I do that system with robotics in grade 9 and robotics in grade 10. We also have a robotics club where students are starting to compete extracurricularly as well. And so, yeah, I guess going along that strain a bit, this is the first year we've competed with our VEX robotics, and we had a group of about 10 to 12 students actively in our club, and then 6 students go on to a competition, which was really exciting for me. I was so proud of those students, how they stepped out there and started to showcase their robotic skills out in the public. And I think that big step for me was students are really comfortable at generating ideas and prototyping, especially in the classroom in small groups. But one of the big barriers I see more and more is getting them to put their ideas out there and either share in a classroom setting or share outside the classroom and test in front of people and risk failure. So it was really nice for me to see them get out of their comfort zone a little bit and compete with other schools. I think there were 60 other teams at the competition we went to, and dozens of schools. So that was really cool for them to experience diversity and see students from other schools doing these same things. So that's been exciting development this last year. And then I teach computer science as well, which ties in. So I teach that to grade 9s and 10s and AP computer science, where we focus on programming and creative software and yeah.
Yeah, and we're also engaging with a class that it has a bit of a marketing piece to it. It's got this awesome community engagement piece. John, tell us about it's your. I always forget the name of this course. What's
the curriculum is graphic production.
Graphic production.
Yeah, but we call it print shop kind of informally, and it's a course where students are building their technical skills in graphic design, marketing, understanding design principles. But then different than like a graphic arts class, which we also offer, where you're focusing more on theory and perfecting designs and really the nitty-gritty of the theory. We're trying to produce as many prototypes we can and serve the community that way. So we have a large-scale printer, which can do banners, stickers, wall vinyl, T-shirts, a number of different applications. And we kind of work alongside the arts as well. We do learn some design theory and principles, but then we produce pretty quickly once we have prototypes. And we're constantly sharing our work with the community, and the more work we share, the more people hear about us and ask for this banner or that that design concept to be produced in real life. And so, the students are kind of building those skills to create in a digital space, but then very quickly let's see it in real life, in either on paper or vinyl or on T-shirts. And when it's a great way for us to serve the community as well.
Mm-hmm. So there was an old theologian, philosopher, Tertullian, and he said, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem, right? So what does faith have to do with the sciences or with STEM? So that's the question I guess I throw out to the group, but a bit of framing of that question here. We've got our LCS learner profile, and we are trying to develop intentionally these attributes or character kind of capabilities in our students or skills. We want to see them develop in each of our students. And to do so, we provide these programs. But the program seems to be about developing problem solving and collaboration and working with VEX and robots. So what does all of that have to do with faith formation? Maybe give us a bit of a perspective on how that works in the courses you teach and the work that you're doing with students.
I can jump in. As I've been talking about the high school and print shop, more specifically, I just mentioned serving the community, and one of the attributes that I find tied closely to that course is being engaged and faithful. So the skills that you learn in the bubble of the classroom or the computer lab or the design lab, those skills aren't put to the test just inside that bubble. And the reason why we're learning those skills is that we are shaping the world around us and engaging with the world. So for instance, some of the graphic design things that my students have made, we want to get that stuff. We're serving the school, but we're also serving communities and churches and showing off some of that stuff. So I think that's the first thing that came to mind to me is just engaging with culture and community with our robots. It sounds kind of silly, and I sometimes get laughs when I bring it up with students, but what does it look like to design a caring robot or a robot that displays the fruits of the Spirit or something like that? Just kind of those are the choices that we get to make when we are being creative and working with technology. We can either have technology that brings people down or builds them up and draws people together. So
yeah, wonder if God had that sort of choice to make with us, right? These beings that simply operate under programmed conditions. And that's the caution I would say, of course, in the STEM being a program, that we're not actually trying to pre-program students. We know that we're cultivating these ways of being in the world. So I love that idea of helping students to be creating as opposed to just consuming, or just thinking about how they will be engaged in the world with their giftings and who they are too. That's a really helpful perspective, John. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think we definitely need to build creators, not just consumers. Mm-hmm. We consume so much. As being light in the world, we need to be putting things out there as Christians, and we also need Christians in all these fields. When we learn about coding and all these computer sciences, it's really important that we have Christians in all of these fields.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love the fact that we're aiming to create creators and not consumers. And I love the fact that our curriculum is not about just ticking boxes. It's about allowing students to express themselves and who God has made them to be. And I think one of the skills that is reinforced, at least in middle school, but it sounds like in elementary and high school as well, is helping students become lifelong learners. ADST and robotics and technology is going to continue to develop for the rest of their lives, and so helping them to remain faithful in that by becoming lifelong learners and critical thinkers and cultivating those skills in them is really helpful. And then I also think we're mirroring the biblical concept of community and collaboration, which I know we've spoken about a lot. And then lastly, in robotics, I think a lot of the time our students are required to persevere and be diligent and have humility in part of the creative process. And I love that character formation that is happening in them as they're engaging in the content and the curriculum.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that last part. I tell students often with programming specifically, programming is like 10% in developing an idea and creativity and 90% troubleshooting and debugging. And the perseverance that builds in students, I think, is incredibly valuable too.
Yeah, and the kind of relationship you build with students when you're providing that ongoing feedback back and forth. I was just thinking too, John, when I had the chance I brought my boys out to the VEX tournament, and I remember the first thing you had said to me was the students first went out and looked at the other students' robots where they were at, and they came back and they made some revisions. And that to me, I've seen in some of your classes, the kind of feedback that you're giving, live time to adjust things, you learn a lot, and you're actually formed quite a bit in those little micro moments of formative feedback and making those adjustments. So I think it does a lot to rewire the brain to help us to think about how we learn from and with one another. And I think it offers a whole other aspect of lifelong learning that we don't always just get when we're in that classroom environment. When we have real context, we actually then are able to start to think about ourselves in spaces differently, and as a result, possibly even cultivate those skills more effectively.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really, as you guys are talking, I'm just, my brain's kind of clicking in that we're really developing students to get some resilience and to really model what it's like to be Christians. Because as John, you're talking about being 90% troubleshooting and debugging, and that's a lot like our Christian walk. It's it's like a lot of 90% of failure and screwing up and not doing things right. But learning that resilience to always just go to God and ask for forgiveness and to move forward in our relationship with Him. And that's just so formative that we're starting to develop those skills even in this area of learning.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure there's stories of transformation and change and impact. What comes to your minds over the last number of years that you've been working with students that highlights how significant this work is in terms of the lives of our students?
I'll jump in there quickly, just because mine links to the perseverance and resilience.
Yeah.
I've had countless students who are frustrated with their robot. It's not doing what they're doing, and they can't see the fault in their code or their construction error. And so they get frustrated and they get irritated with themselves, with the situation, with the robot. And it's so great to have a strong team around them and a teacher and a mentor in the room who can help them see where the fault is, guide them through that process, and then watching the joy in them afterwards when they overcome that frustration and that irritation and they achieve their goal is fantastic in the moment. But the lifelong lesson there is that actually when we hit these hiccups in life, we, through the guidance of others, through mentors, through family, people around us, friends, we can overcome these obstacles and we can become better people ourselves. So as much as it's us doing it for our robot or to our robot, it's actually a lesson for us that God's wanting us to learn. And so I've had a lot of those moments, and then that transfers across the whole curriculum. So in other subjects later on, months down the line, that student steps out of line. I've now got that relationship where I can approach that student. We can discuss what's happened because we had a frustrating moment. We overcame it. Here's another one. Hey, let's talk about this. And so being able to build those really deep relationships has been hugely beneficial.
Yeah.
The theme at the elementary school is very similar. Lots of frustration when things don't work. So I have some good examples of kids who ADST has been happening now for 3 years at the elementary. And I had kids that could not handle it 3 years ago. And things wouldn't work, and they just get frustrated, throw things on the floor, and they're done. They're not going to continue. But some of these same kids, I can think of one in particular, when something doesn't work, I'm just watching to see the fireworks. And sure enough, he just keeps trying, and he's learned how to take risks. He's learned how to be a little more creative, try a few different things, and realizing that, hey, we can take risks in a safe environment here. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. That's part of what ADSC is all about. But yeah, the resilience piece, that's huge. And Just being okay with something not working. Some kids,
Yeah.
they leave class and theirs never worked.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah. When you think of stories of impact, change, anything come to mind?
In the high school, I'm thinking about the students, equipping them to work with technology, and it surprises me how many students I still get who come into like a robotics class or a computers class and say something to me along the lines of, I'm not really a techie person, but this course was open and it looked fun, so I decided to try it out. And I don't say this to them, but it's almost like, guess what? Technology is going to keep developing whether you go along with it or not.
Yeah.
And whether you know it or not, you are a lot more technically skilled than you give yourself credit for. So I often get students who come into the technologies kind of with that tentative mindset, and just getting them to grow their confidence and these skills is incredibly rewarding. I'm thinking of my grade 9s this year in our 3D printing unit, where they were very apprehensive about using a CAD software and developing things in a digital space. But once they started we went through some tutorials, they printed their first parts, they realized the kinds of things they could create, they started to grab onto it. And then I challenged them to look for things around the world that there's needs for, and I gave them some of my problems around my house, just selfishly, like here's a latch on my window that's this, or a knob on this light switch, and this toy that's broken for my kids, and they're starting to like, well, we can do that easily, and they're looking outwards with their skills. And then one student who came in with that attitude, I'm not really a techie person, I haven't really done this, he comes to me and says, well, I have a bathtub and we lost the stopper. Could I quickly print one today in class? And it's like, of course, that's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
And so he's looking outwards at the world and saying, I have these skills that match up with the world around me, and I have the confidence now that I can use them and shape my community.
I'd love one of those too.
Yeah.
Maybe we can throw this out there as families that might be listening and might have some creative ideas to write to you and explore some of those with you. I think, you had pitched the idea a couple weeks back, looking for any projects, and I think I came back with 3 or 4 projects just for print shop ideas in our school community. So there's tons of opportunities.
I think students find it more meaningful too if there's a face to what they're designing for, or a family, or a context of why am I designing this? You're not just going through a tutorial anymore. You're engaging with people.
Definitely. So as I think about, I might be overly dichotomizing this a bit here, but as I think of the humanities giving us a picture and grounding of what's happened in the past, and STEM as a future readiness kind of approach, faith obviously is this grounding in the present. Obviously, I'm exaggerating this a little bit. You need faith to understand the past and to have hope in the future as well, right? But I guess what I'm wondering is, give us a bit of a picture of maybe where our programs are going. What are things that you're working on that you'd love to see on each of your campuses, that you're excited about, that you're developing, that you're seeing students lean more into, and give our listeners just a little bit of a sneak peek or preview of some things that we're working on.
The big one I've already mentioned that's new this year is kind of giving students extracurricular opportunities for robotics and interacting with other schools and experiencing that kind of diverse opportunity to engage with other ideas coming from all different perspectives. We're continuing to develop our drones program as we go into the future. So we're building flying vehicles as well. That's typically grades 11s and 12s once they move a little bit past the VEX stuff. And I know that ties in with some of what you do in the middle school as well, with developing flying vehicles. And then also just looking more and more, the one thing I see coming down the road that I think we should think about getting ahead of is students are getting more and more comfortable with programming and robotics. But things are already starting to change, and they need to start thinking more about this boom in artificial intelligence and how that's changing programming. And we won't have time to dive all the way down into that, but I'm trying to integrate that more into how I teach. And right now we're so focused on those language models like ChatGPT, and we forget that machine learning and artificial intelligence has been used for years to develop many things. I showed my students this morning a video of Rosalind Picard at the MIT Effective Computing Lab, and she's a strong Christian woman, and she has used artificial intelligence for devices for seizure detection and autism research and emotional awareness, wearable technology. And so those are the kind of things that the future, what students will be working on 10 years from now, might look a little bit less like the programs we're writing today and more like machine learning, and just kind of changing students' perspectives that AI isn't just about like students plagiarizing papers or like a dystopian robot takeover or something like that. AI is something that can be used for good if we think about it and we slow down and we think about the consequences and how to develop it responsibly and honor God with that type of development too. So that's something I'm kind of looking forward to in the future as well.
In the middle school, we have made 2 changes in our robotics programming this year. We have brought the chuck gliders have historically been done only in grade 8, and we've brought them down into grade 7 as well this year. So that's been great. The students have had a lot of fun with them. John Keel teaches that program, and he's amazing. And so I'm really looking forward to what that's going to look like next year when this year's grade 7s who've done the chuck gliders get to take it a step further next year. And then in our grade 8 robotics programming, we've introduced software in grade 8 for coding outside of VEX. So just introducing them to a second set of software, which has been really great. And then to pick up on what John said about the AI, it's also we've begun introducing that in middle school and talking about how to use the AI software ethically and morally and responsibly. And what does that look like? Because I think most students naturally lean towards AI and feel like AI is really going to help them, which is great. And now it's just up to us as teachers to channel that and steward that in a wise way.
Some new things at the elementary. One new thing, the newest thing this year, and I always like to add a new thing, try to add something new every year, is Lego Spike robotics. It's pretty amazing. I've been primarily doing that with grades 2 and 3. I like the idea that they have a bit of variety every couple of years at the elementary, so it's not just Vex. It's Ozobot, Lego, and then Vex. We also, like the middle school, every grade level uses some sort of coding software, and the kids are getting better. They're finishing the programs faster every year because they've had a bit of previous experience the year before. So I'm sure high school is going to start seeing that a bit sooner. I had some grade 8 students helping in my ADST room, and they never got ADST when they were at the elementary. So they were a little bummed that they didn't have that chance. But I'm also toying with the idea of possibly building drones with the older grades, but I'll have to talk to John about that. I don't want there to be too much overlap. However, I know in high school, it's more of an elective, and elementary, they don't have a choice. So, but yeah, so that way everybody gets to do it. But it'll be different, I'm sure. But I'll talk to you about that a bit later.
Definitely.
Very cool. All right, so as we start to wrap things up, let's just end with this question about some wisdom that you can share with our families. Maybe STEM has never been a thing, but seems to be their kids. What kind of things can you offer to our parents to maybe focus on or talk to their kids about or bring into the home in terms of learning? Let's start with elementary, and then we'll go middle high.
Sure. One thing we touch on a lot during ADST when we're using technology, especially when we're on the iPads, is digital citizenship. And I actually do that a little bit separately with the grade levels as well. And just encourage responsible use of technology. There's a lot of good family resources out there online. Commonsense.org has a lot of family resources as well. Be on top of that. We want kids to use technology for good and for being makers and not just consumers.
Yeah, that's a huge part of our faith identity, being discerning and helping students to know how to make decisions in light of these really powerful devices and and forms of representing themselves in the world too. So yeah, that's a big part of our curriculum framework. We've talked a little bit about that in our season 2 episodes on digital citizenship. I think John was actually involved in some of those conversations too. So yeah, the work that you're doing, Tim, I think is super formative and scaffolds really into middle and high school. So yeah, Lee, things to add? Wisdom, insights?
Yeah, we also spend a bunch of time talking about good digital citizenship. But I think another thing that for me stands out is that if we're wanting to be authentic to our students' futures, we're going to have to, the onus is on us to get them comfortable with technology and comfortable with learning new technologies. And so robotics is a means to do that. Devices is a means to do that. Because the students we are teaching now, one day are going to work with technologies that aren't even invented yet, but they're going to be dependent on it. And so I see it as for families who maybe are not that techie to be able to say, but my children's future authentically is going to have technology integrated into almost every component. And so let's help them get comfortable with that now.
Yeah, some of the best moments I have teaching students is when I see them to when I see them create something or write a line of code or something that I have no clue what they did, but it's amazing and it's working, and I can just step back and say, I have no clue how you did that, but it's so cool. Can you teach me how that works, and why does that line of code work, and how does your robot stay so stable like that, or and then just let the kids teach me a bit as well. And I think as a parent, me personally and other families can focus on this too, is taking that posture more, especially if you have a kid who's diving into technology and you have, I'm not a techie person type of position, and try to learn from your students. Give them opportunities to teach you. Maybe it starts with, how does this Fortnite work? Or like, I don't know. But just engage with them, and then that gives you the platform to also speak into how these interests and how these things tie into their faith and tie into how to be faithful to Christ and to Scripture, because Scripture does speak into how we use technology. And unless we learn it alongside our children, we won't be able to make those connections. And yeah, I think it's really important to just have the right posture, and then also give them the wisdom that we have as older people to discern what technology is doing to them and which ones to set aside for a certain amount of time and which ones to dig into and use responsibly. So.
Yeah, awesome. This was really helpful in terms of clarifying and inviting families into a closer relationship and partnership, which is what we want to see. And John, even as you were sharing there, I was thinking that sometimes we want these conversations and about faith and formation to take place, and maybe they take place when we connect with our kids at a level that we're not always comfortable at. And I think that's what we often end up doing as teachers and caregivers. We're trying to meet the students where they're at and provide context to bring them into, so that their faith might be formed as well. So a great conversation. We really appreciate the opportunity to connect with each of you and hear your voices and the work that you're doing in our STEM programming.
Yeah, we want to thank the panel for just engaging all of us today. It's been an awesome session, and we really appreciate you guys. And we just want to remind our listeners that we do want to be interactive. If you have any comments, you can reach out to us. Our email is podcast@langleychristian.com. So we value your input, and thanks for listening.